All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I'm your host, Damon Pistolka. With me today, I've got Alan Chaffee from Turning Point Strategic Advisors. I want to say consulting because that's what I saw on one of your website pages, but Turning Point Strategic Advisors out of Seattle, Washington. Alan, great to have you here today.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I appreciate it, Damon.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. We're going to be talking today about the repercussions of COVID relief. We're going to talk about your practice a bit more and how you're helping people. We might even talk about that University of Oregon Ducks, see what how they're doing.
That's right.
Perennially a strong team. I mean, you can't say anything bad about
right.
that. Perennially a strong team, but and what it's like living as a duck out of water in Seattle, kind of. Because it's a little rivalry there. So, Alan, let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you really decided to get into Turning Point and doing what you're doing today.
Great, thank you. So my background is University of Oregon Go Ducks. We talked about that. Public accounting, Coopers and Librarian back in the day, doing auditing. Did that for a couple of years. Went out into private industry, and it wasn't intentional, but the first 4 jobs I had were all heavy restructuring jobs. Every company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and I should have done a better job vetting my job opportunities. But what I learned is the craft, and I learned to love the hard work it takes. Being an operator in a company in distress is so different than a company that's running smoothly or at least running profitably. And so in 2001, after 10 years of being in private industry, I bought a CPA firm in Bellevue, Washington, with the idea that we would do restructure turnaround work from the office of the CFO, similar to what some of the work that the Big Four were doing back before they got busted up, 2004, 2005. So in 2009, we spun that group of consultants out to create Turning Point. And today we're 36 consultants, primarily in the Northwest, although we do have clients around the world and around the U.S., but all of them have a Northwest connection.
Yeah. So you are so true. You just can't emphasize it enough. It is so much different when you're working in a distressed company compared to a company that's just operating normally, making profits. So what are some of the critical things you think you learned right off the bat? You were in the feet to the fire right away.
I'm going to tell you a little bit of the journey, because what made me successful early on is the ability to make decisive, painful decisions. Yeah. So we decide, okay, we need to cut 32 staff, and I would cut 50 or whatever it would take. Go deep, go hard, get it done once. People would say to me, "Oh my gosh, what about the culture, and what about this customer?" And I'd say, "I don't, what culture doesn't matter when I can't make payroll. Get out of the way." Right. And today, one of the things I try to do before we pull off the knife, and we still go deep and we go hard on the expense reductions before we look to revenue increases or margin moves, is finding a set of common shared values amongst employees and creating a sense of culture. Because after the staff reduction, everybody's pretty wounded and hurt, and remember, these people have been fighting for some period of time. It isn't a shock to them. They're already beat up. We come in and do that. We have a set of common values that we can rebuild on.
Yeah. Wow, that if people listening now, if you've never been in a distressed situation, what you just said is gold. And what I went through a half a dozen or more of these, but the ability to cut beyond where you need to be today. I posted about this several months ago, because what happens if you don't is you'll cut once and then you go, oh, that wasn't enough. You go back and cut again, and you go back and cut again. But if you don't cut enough in the first time, everybody's wondering if I'm next.
That's right. You lose credibility. Right. And when we're digging out of a deep hole and you're asking people to do more than they've ever done before and to do it differently because what they were doing wasn't working, you have to have trust. Right. And part of that trust comes from common values. The other part of that trust is being accountable for what you said you're going to do. So when you stand up and say, "This is it, guys, and here's what we're going to do, and here's the vision forward," if you have to say, "Whoops, sorry about that, I was wrong," and "Whoops, sorry about that, I was wrong," you're going to have your very best, if they're still there, leave because they can't trust you. And people are going to begin to really talk negatively about management behind their back, which takes the energy and the soul out of the organization.
Yeah. And that's great and great point. So cut deeper than you think you may need at the time, but so you don't have to do it again until you're ready to go on the other side of it. So what are some of the other things you learned working in those distressed companies that were really valuable today, even in good running companies?
Well, the one is it always costs more and takes longer than you think, no matter what. I don't have a single example where that isn't true. As entrepreneurial minded people, we're optimistic, right? And so we think we can grow this faster. We can negotiate these better contracts. We can find new customers. We can change our pivot, whatever we're doing, but it takes longer and costs more than you originally think. So that's one. So whatever budget and plan you have, know that it's going to take longer and cost more, and build that alternative budget. You may march to your original one. You may hold accountability meetings to the original one.
Yeah.
But the second one is I look in organizations for what I call the terrorists, right? And I take them out. And often they are high individual contributors who mean a lot to the organization, but they stand behind the curtain and they backtalk. They pull energy away from the mission. They sabotage the mission, and either intentionally or unintentionally. So I also look for. I don't always just keep the people who are the very best at what they do. I also make sure that again they're coming back to that culture piece. If they're high individual contributors, but they're lone wolves and they don't fall in line, we take them out at the first round too. So I'm now more patient and waiting to make my moves to make sure I understand who the people are, what skill set they have, what they bring, do they fit the culture, and then make the moves.
Wow,
Early in my years, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, early in my years of doing restructuring, I was fast. I had a lot to prove. We're going to come in, and in 3 days, we're lining people up and getting, taking care of severance or whatever we need to do to get them out the door, get them off the payroll. And now I wait because, it's more than just cutting costs. It's trying to preserve the soul of the business so you can grow forward.
That is another mic drop gold nugget moment right there, because you're right. It's yes, you need to move quickly, but you have to preserve the soul of the business as well. And I really like what you said about taking out terrorists, because there are some, I mean, they can be good performers to the business. They could be talented in their own way, but like you said, if they're a lone wolf and they're talking downplaying the management's ability to do what you're trying to do or anything like that, they have to go, because you have no chance if you don't have everyone working together.
That's correct. Yeah.
Or much less chance, I should say.
Right.
Wow, those are great. Whew, bring back some memories there. So as you got into this, you learned all this stuff, and now you're in companies helping them do it. How do you think that the needs of companies have changed over time? Because you've been doing this more than a few weeks, and it's kind of changed at how, the whole financing piece of business. And then when you talk about restructuring, turnarounds, all that. So how has the needs of these businesses really changed, the ownership groups and things like that?
That's a good question. Let me think about that. I'd say that one is that we find disruption happening a lot more. So we've gone to companies that were operating well, and the internet came along, or Amazon came along, or the iPhone came along and disrupted print media, right? So or corrugated came along and stole production to print paper. So what I'm finding today, what I see the most is there's a lot more. It's happening more rapid. That there's disruption, businesses, and there's a tendency to fight the fight you've been fighting.
Yeah.
Right? So dig down, dig in, cut costs, to hang in there, find more customers, whatever you try to do, without really acknowledging the underlying reason why your industry isn't changing, right? So one of the things we look at is we say, okay, is this company having issues, or is the industry having issues, right? If the industry as a whole, and I have this number of examples of clients where the industry as a whole has been disrupted, and everybody's still fighting the fight the way they fought it 10 years ago. And we got to, at that point, you got to stand back and say, what are we going to do differently? What technology changes, service changes, what's happening? Because if we fight this fight every year, it's going to be N minus $1 in revenue, or an N minus, the next year it's going to be N minus $1 in revenue. So that's one. I think that the standardization of loan, commercial lenders, which happened with the Frank-Dodd Act, changes
Mhm.
things a lot, right? You really can't get much different terms from bank A to commercial bank A, commercial bank B, which has built up a wide variety of other alternative lenders who aren't regulated. So I think that that's a good thing, right? One, whether you're dealing with your local bank here or local bank there, their interest rates are going to be plus or minus, 50 basis points. Their covenants are going to be plus or minus, 3 to 3.5 times, equity leverage or debt service coverage is all going to be very similar.
Yeah.
But by forcing everybody into a box, they create this whole world of alternative lenders. So I think one of the things that's gotten easier is when we come into a business and they've got lender fatigue and the lender wants them out, I've got way more choices over here to find a lender that's alternative, non-regulated, who'll lean heavy into inventory without any AR, like a direct-to-consumer business, right? They don't have AR. They pay it on credit card.
Yeah.
They generally have a lot of inventory, right? Well, a commercial lender doesn't like a lot of inventory. They're going to give them 20 cents on the dollar with a pretty low cap. So I think that's something that's interesting, and we've been able to use a lot when we're helping companies refinance an aggressive lender out and give them 12 months to operate outside of a traditional covenant to put their business back on the right track.
Now, this is something that someone asked me the other day, and it just came up as you're thinking of this. So how many times do you see companies that you're helping to restructure, and not because of the work you're doing, but because of the work of the company or the industry or other, be able to come out of those alternative forms of financing back into traditional financing once they've gone there?
A lot.
Okay.
We do it all the time. Yep.
Okay.
And one of the things we do is we start early on. If we have a path forward, we have a forecast and a path, and we're having some success, right? We start to shop it early on.
Okay.
And what we're getting is the credit back credit guys to understand the credit. They start thinking about it. Banks are hungry, right? There's more money to lend than there are people willing to, who are available to borrow. Banks are really hungry for deals. And so we've built, because of our reputation in the marketplace in the Northwest, and they say, oh, Turning Point's bringing us a client. They start to say, okay, when is it going to be ready? Right. And so we say, okay, we're 18 months out, and we begin to shop it. We get them ready. We even do introductions to a leadership team. So that's, so we get them out all the time. Nice. Now, if I can't get them financed, right? Well, so the bank's fatigued, they're going to be more aggressive with court action if we don't find an alternative lender. We can't get an alternative lender because it's too far gone. Then we're looking at possibly either equity sale at a big discount or a liquidation.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Because I know I knew, like you said, with a good plan, if you're executing on it, you can do it. It's just a matter of, I think a lot of people hear of people that go into an alternative financing situation, may not have a good plan, may not have a, and good plan, good execution, and you know what that does. So
I hear, we've had clients go, 13 or 18% interest. We can't pay that. That's crazy. I was paying 6.5% before, prime plus 3 or whatever it was. And I'd say, look, the only other option is equity, and your business today is worth very little. And if we're successful, you're going to be worth a lot more. Compare that change in valuation compared to the cost of a high interest rate. And they often, every time they go, okay, I understand, but how long can we get out of there? I'm like, okay, well, it depends on execution. From there, we have a plan. We've got an alternative lender. We break it down into daily measurements of inputs and outputs that make sure we're on track. I don't want to wait to the end of the month.
Yeah.
3 weeks after the month, we get financial statements and say,
no good.
No, yeah, we want to know today how we did yesterday or how we did this morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That I tell you that measurement, like you're saying, on a daily basis, weekly basis at the worst is really, it's critical. Otherwise you'll get, like you said, you get to the end of the month. No, we didn't make it. You have no time to adjust. Just waste too much. It's gone. It's interesting that you say that, because I think that's another key point between a business that's running normally and a business that's distressed, is that daily measurement of those, of knowing where you're at. Almost, if you can, to a gross margin line of the business even is really, it's key to staying on track. So as you, this is great because you got, man, the experience here is so incredible. So, um, do you think that this region, the PNW, really has any special needs different from other areas of the country much, or it's the blend of industries are pretty similar? I was thinking about that. I was here.
Yeah, another good question. I don't know if I can answer that. I think that
Yeah.
we've got a unique business here. We've got a unique business environment. We've got a lot of
Yeah.
Microsoft centric consultants, and Microsoft's
Yeah,
big on
that's
the
true.
consultants, you know, that it does cost them more, but it gives them unique flexibility. I've watched some lights out whole towers. Then one day we're done, right? And they just, everybody next day go in, every window's dark, everybody's gone, right? You
Wow.
can't do that when they're employees, right?
Yeah, that's
You got all
true.
kinds of legacy issues. So Microsoft, Amazon, of course, doesn't really rely on consultants as much. That's not their philosophy, but they
Mhm.
do use a lot of local resources in their film business and their shipping, right?
Yeah.
You've got Boeing, right? We've got heavy Boeing both in the South End and up in
Mhm.
Everett, and a large contingent of Boeing suppliers, which most of them aren't doing very well because Boeing, eats its suppliers alive.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
eats them and spits them out. Yeah.
yeah. I was in that industry. I've worked with lots of clients. There are some that figure it out and do well, but a lot of them, negotiate heavily with Boeing going up the curve. They don't make a lot of money. They just get up, and then negotiates heavy down the curve again. And then they just announced today, right, that the 737, 10, or they changed the name from the MAX to 10, right, is now going to be delayed further. I've got $200+ million clients that desperately need that skyline to come back up. And so
Yeah.
and Boeing's been telling them, Boeing procurement's been telling them that's going to happen. And just announced today it's not going to happen yet.
Yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
trouble with Boeing.
There are some uniques. I mean, in certain respects, this is almost like the Michigan area in the automotive industry. For us, it's
Right.
airlines up here. So,
Yeah.
or the aircraft. Um, awesome. So now, when we were talking about this before, you brought us some interesting topics about the COVID relief programs. We have a bunch of the COVID relief programs, and it's one of the topics we wanted to cover today is the repercussions of some of these. But let's talk first about where you saw the COVID relief programs helping the businesses and them using it successfully.
I think I've never seen commercial lenders work so hard. 7
Yeah.
days a week, 10 hours a day doing PPP1.
Yeah.
Right. They didn't know what they're doing. Very few of them had a sophisticated back end to manage it. They were doing it all manually. They didn't, it was no one ever done anything like that before. And I work a lot with commercial lenders, and to a T that they were exhausted. And not many of them got it right. As you know, many,
Mm-hmm.
I won't use names of several of the local, Seattle based lenders didn't get it right. And the ones that did really benefited, right? Because in fact, we were collecting ones that are working and ones that, behind the scenes, like we're not going to get there. And so, there was a lot of movement of
Yes.
commercial accounts at the end of that because they were so exhausted. But that certainly was a lifeline to a lot of clients. And there were some clients who took a lot of PPP and didn't need it. But for most of our clients, it was, in the first round, they were in terror. No one knew what was going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
Second round was much more relaxed. People built the back end. You could do it online. It was pretty easy.
Yeah.
And then after that, there was the small EIDL. I think it was $50,000, then $250,000, eventually up to $2 million. That's a good program. It's a 3.75% interest, 20-year amortization. The first 2 years interest accrued. So that's a good program, and I think we helped quite a bit of our client base go out and take advantage of that. And the amount wasn't really based on much, right? It was just like what you asked for, you got. It's a Fed program. They have no ability to manage it, and they don't want to manage it, right? Or SBA
Mm-hmm.
program for that one, sorry. And then the one you and I talked about before was the Main Street, and I think that's going to be a problem.
Okay.
The Main
So
Street was like 3 or 4 times 2019 EBITDA. It's got a balloon at the end of the third year. It's got 15% principal payments starting in year 3. So into the fourth year is fifth year is the balloon, sorry, and 15% principal payment. So if you max that out, say you take a $2.5 million Main Street loan, in 2023, depending on the date you took the loans, but sometime in 2023, because the program ended in 2021, you're going to have a $475,000 balloon payment, principal payment due. I think that's going to be tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Fed has come out and said they have no interest in doing anything about it. You have to pay it. So I don't know what's going to happen, but we're talking to a number of lenders who took most banks said we're not doing that. They could see what was going to happen, and they're going to have to go to try to collect. So a lot of banks did not enter into underwriting Main Street loans, but some of them did, and I think there's going to be a significant issue in 2023 around Main Street.
Yeah. So the Main Street loans, I mean, I'm not familiar with that program. So who would typically be looking at that or would have looked at that? And
anybody was available for it. You didn't have to really show need. It's a like I said, a 5-year balloon with 15. So interest accrued for the first year, interest only for the second year, and the third year interest payments monthly. And you could choose to make a principal payment each month, or you can choose to make a 15% payment on the anniversary and the 15% the next year, and then a balloon after that, right?
Okay.
Of the balance. And so I think that it's the list of we pulled the list. I'm sorry, somebody's calling me. We pulled the list of borrowers. It's quite a few of them in the billions of dollars.
Wow. Shoo. Yeah, that's the one that you said is going to be a kind of a because
I don't know if it happened when my system rang. Are you back?
You back here? Back here now?
Sorry about that.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Yeah, so that's going to be a stinger for some businesses, especially if 3 to 4x EBITDA. Yeah, I mean, if you're planning right, you might be able to you can bring that around to be able to do it, but you got to be planning for it. That's for sure.
We did contract underwriting for a local lender on the Main Street. There was a client there that did $26 million in Main Street loans.
Oh, wow.
So at the time I'm thinking, how are they going to do that? Right. It's a disaster.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's hard to comprehend with some of it. So as we're looking at this, but overall, like the PPP programs, the EIDL, those programs pretty solid. You're feeling like
I thought they were good programs and desperately needed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Desperately needed. And again, there are a few people out there who took some pretty significant PPP loans so that their business was actually thriving. But in our space, the clients that we know, and we helped put through, I think 42 or 43 PPP loans. They were very much needed when they took the loans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know of a few that we worked with that it was a couple were on oil and gas and things like that. If they wouldn't have got them, it would have been a heck of a mess. And not these are 8 and 9 figure companies that it definitely helped them out an awful lot to get through that time.
You think about what the federal government did in 2009 and 10. They pivoted to support the banks who had failing loans.
Yeah.
And what happened then is the banks just failed those companies. We did 37 receiverships, hundreds of thousands across the country, probably. I don't know the number, but they moved to pivot to support the banks. And the banks did not pivot to support the bad loans, right? And so this time the federal government said, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to go right to the business owners, pump money into them. In either case, there was certainly a percentage of that probably was not used correctly, but overall, I think the result was good.
Yeah, and you make a great point. The result to the actual business owners and the people, the borrowers, was probably much better through these COVID relief programs.
Yes,
for
sure.
It got to the places that it really was being used to put. I mean, because a lot of these places, obviously, the PPP loan was helping people keep paychecks coming and keep the business afloat, which is really good.
We had clients that had laid everybody off. We're done, and then the PPP came through and they brought everybody back.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so that's a great benefit.
Yeah, it was. So as you see the the other things happen in the industry. I know we talked about the repercussions of some of these COVID programs, the Main Street Loan Program. Yeah, if someone out there has got it, they need to understand what they're going to be in for next year, and really make sure your financial people are planning appropriately and you're ready for that. But as we're coming out of this now, and we've talked about this a couple times, what are you seeing just from the effects of COVID on the companies in general, the economy, certain areas of the company? Because you're in a unique position at Turning Point there, because you're working with companies that are distressed, that are struggling a lot of times. And I think that where we see it first kind of is an indicator of what's happening in the economy. And I might be wrong, but I just thought that might be an interesting thing to talk about.
Let me see if this is the right answer, because I understand it. I think I understand your question. Here's what we're seeing in our client base right now. And I think we talked a little bit about this before. They've got too much inventory, right? The banks are slowly beginning to ratchet back covenants. We just had a client that renewed their line of credit for $1 million, not even a very big one. And the bank went from 3.5 debt to equity leverage ratio to 2.5. Now they qualify, but the bank's ratcheting it back because it's an early warning signal for them, right? If this client pushes that, it means they're losing money. Equity's going down, right? Retained going down. It signals them quicker that, hey, we need to be looking at this. So you've got banks ratcheting back on their credit. You've got companies who've got too much inventory and more on the water. And for the most part, if I ordered what I ordered last year is not exact fit for what I need this year. So the result of that's going to be, I'm going to have inventory I can't really sell, potentially, right? We heard, I just was sharing with you that we heard Costco's CFO on the analyst call just last week saying, well, we've got 24% too much inventory in most of its Christmas trees, right? We ordered way too much last year. They've been sitting there all year. I find that in our client base that are manufacturing distribution, 100% of them have the same problem. In the COVID bump, they all didn't have enough product. They ordered everything to get their hands on. It got delayed. We're down in demand. It all showed up. They're struggling to pay for it, and it's not the right product for the season. Target.
Yeah.
I mean, you got some of the best logistic companies in the world: Amazon, Target, Walmart, Costco, who got this wrong.
Yes.
Right. And look at the $100 million or $50 million e-commerce or manufacturing distribution who don't have that level of sophistication, and they all got the same problem.
Exactly. It's got to be a lot tougher for them. Just wow. Because you don't have the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of exceptional people, systems to do this, right? So right. I'm sitting here with like you said, a $20 or $50 million company trying to do that, and it is interesting because I think that this is going to bleed over. I mean, this is not going to go away in the next couple of months. That's for sure with what's happening.
No.
Do you think?
No, it's not going to go away. I mean, they're sitting on that inventory, credits ratcheting back, cost of credits going up, right? Or interest rates are significantly up, both not only in your home mortgage, but also in your business lines of credit or term notes. Demand is still down in big parts of the industries, right? Aerospace, we know, is still down. Consumer consumption is down. The real estate market's slowing, which means that more consumer consumption is going to go down. So I think that this potentially could be pretty significant, pretty rough coming into 2023.
Yeah. What are some bright spots you see? Because I mean, it's we talk about doom and gloom because that's easy. But where do you see some bright spots where people are going, man? It's things are going well for us now.
I don't see a whole lot of bright spots. If I were to add to my doom and gloom, I'd say the cost of hiring talent is up 25% from a year ago. It could be, if I was to work really hard, I might say that people are willing to switch right now. Now they're getting a premium. But even in our business, we've had some fantastic talent come to us that we would have had a hard time get before. Now they're expensive, but it could be that now with the common perception is I can leave my job today and get a 20% bump. We got people entering the marketplace that would not, traditionally be leaving their jobs. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
So if you are in desperate need of people and can afford to pay them, you can probably get them.
Yeah, because businesses obviously need the very best talent to be successful. I'm a firm believer in that, right?
Yeah.
If you can get the very best talent, they will pay for themselves.
Yeah, that's just true. The A players will more than make up for a lot of B and C players.
That's right.
That's for sure. Yeah, because I'm trying to think through. I mean, we're not around it here, but I know the oil and gas is going through a pretty good time. They've been at extended highs, and some things happening there. But you're right. There's a lot of industry that is really struggling, and some, when you look at some of the heavy industry or heavier industries like the trucking industry and things like that, the supply chain is still just kicking them so hard that they can't do what they do. I've got a couple of friends that are in larger or publicly owned kind of companies there, and when you can't get product to either assemble or deliver what you're supposed to deliver in these big facilities. Well, I think we have a pretty good graveyard of partially clean, or not graveyard, but waiting area of partially completed trucks here south of Seattle, or southeast of Seattle.
Yeah, I think large tech is still going strong.
Yeah,
small tech is getting crushed by valuations, but the clients that I have, or the people that I know who are supporting Microsoft and Amazon and Google and Facebook, all in Seattle here, are still going red hot.
Okay.
But if you're looking for something, an industry that's doing well, that's still going pretty well. And both recruiting for those and development, software development, those guys are doing well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting to go because you obviously get to see across the board and understand it a lot more. But hopefully that the people that, at least the people you're working with and some of the other people that are running into some of these challenges are successful in doing it. Because I mean, it could be pretty ugly for a long time if we don't get a few of these things ironed out in the next couple quarters. So, what do you think? What are you guys thinking for the Q1 2023 kind of thing? Are we going to be kind of more of the same, or?
I think our restructured business is going to be very busy.
Yeah.
I think that we're just now beginning to see it pick up. And there's no solution short term. Fed's going to raise rates again, right? So interest rates are still going up. Fuel prices are coming down a little bit, but not fast enough.
Yeah.
Employees are still expensive. Supply chain is better. But most people got too much of what they have and they can't afford to buy what they need. So I think that we're going to be for a while into, still more businesses in distress than we have been, prior to the COVID.
Yeah. Yep. I would agree. So now you guys do one thing I think is pretty unique though. You actually help to develop CFOs. Explain a little bit about that, because not many people say, well, we develop CFOs for middle market companies.
It's actually my true passion, the reason I'm in this business.
Yeah.
So when you go to school and you get your accounting degree and you go sit the CPA exam and you go to work for one of the big houses, they don't teach you how to be the CFO in the middle market at all, right? They teach you, for lack of a better word, big company gap, right? We're doing stuff. We're checking source documents and validating their recording transactions according to the gap, and so when I left, I thought I was, I'm like, hey, I had a couple of years at Cooper's, I had an accounting degree, I got my CPA, I went into private industry, and I got my job at a $25 million candy company as the controller. I didn't know anything. Everything I learned in school was out the window.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to use the system. I didn't understand inventory terms. I didn't understand, work in process accounting. I had memorized the journal entries, which is far different than every time you sit down in the month and you got to figure out what revenue is. It's not what you invoice, it's what you earned, right? And so all the stuff that we do in the middle market, I didn't learn in all those years I went to school and worked in the accounting field. And then I went from controller to CFO, and my boss at the time, is still a very good friend of mine, would say, I do this big write-up. He'd say, I don't know what to do with this. And so I would work harder to give him more numbers. And he'd say, "Oh my God, what are you doing? I don't know what to do with this." And then he left, and I became president, really young, 300 employees, primary airspace, should not have had that job. And my controller, who I had trained, brought me the same book. And I said, "I don't know what to do with this. Oh my God, what am I going to do with all these numbers? They make no sense to me, right? I can't connect what's happening in these spreadsheets to what I'm seeing on the plant floor, what my customers are telling us." So I quickly learned how to be COO. So my position is that in the middle market, your CFO has to be a COO. Now they got to understand, you got to get financial statements out timely.
Yeah.
They got to be according to the gap. They got to be detailed. You got to have a variance. You got to have budgets. You got to know, but that's where we start. We got to move from the tower. We often call it the accountant sitting in the tower on the carpet out into the factory floor, for lack of a better analogy, and go to work. Right? How do we bring inventory turns? How do we increase them up? How do we increase inventory turns? How do we get better labor utilization? How do we, how do we negotiate smarter with our vendors for just-in-time delivery? So those things that I spent, 8 or 9 years in private industry learning how to do across 3 different companies, and I sat back and I'm like, okay, the CFO in the middle market, it doesn't really exist. They're either controllers or they're COO. So how do we blend that to what I call shaping the future? Like, how do we get from the office of the CFO, who understands operations, to sit with the executive team and help shape the future? Because he or she are the only person on that team who has the financial models to dial, like, okay, this means this, and this means this, and here's our range of outcomes if we do the following things. Now, whatever we forecast is wrong by definition. We can't get it right, but I can get close. So, I'm passionate about that. The only reason I started this business was to train people to be CFOs in the middle market as a way to maybe defend the choices I made in life. But I want other people to know. And so we have our team talks about it every week. What are we doing to develop our staff accountants to controllers to CFOs to COOs? And that magic happens when we just have one of our partners, who's been a great CFO for us for about 5 years, come to me and say, "Okay, I just got involved in the sales team, and I got them to do these following things, and I changed this and I did that." And I'm like, "Okay, you got it." That's exactly what a great CFO does. He doesn't care that sales doesn't report to him. He cares that they're not getting the job done that they need to be successful. And he moves in there and he figures it out.
Yeah. That's awesome, because you are teaching people critical skills, financial people critical skills, because I used to be the COO when you had to do what you're teaching CFOs to do from haphazardly, because I don't have the financial background. I can see what the real world is, or what's happening on the factory floor, and connect that back to the numbers. But the CFO has this different, unique, when they see that, they can translate that into financial results so much easier than a COO can. Right. And that is what's critical in companies, especially, if you're investor owned, or you're, God forbid, publicly traded or something like that, you live and die by the numbers, and that CFO can be a tremendous help in that. This is really cool. It's great to understand. Yeah. And so do you then help other companies develop their controllers into those people as well?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Often when we get hired, they say, "Okay, we don't want you here forever."
Yeah.
One, do we have the right person? Yes or no? Could be either. Yeah. If we don't have the right person, can you help us get that person? Yes. And then once we have them, can you help them along their journey to be a CFO in the middle market? Yeah. And I'm like, yes, we do that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Because that is really when you can connect the numbers to the what's happening in the business, it's like, I don't even know. I'm sure it's been in a movie where you're just sitting there and all of a sudden the lights turn on.
The Matrix.
Yeah, the Matrix. Exactly. There you go. That's it. The Matrix. When he sees the Matrix, it's just like the world becomes so much clearer, because you can begin to see, if we do this, it does that, and you can start to really not only visualize, but then execute those things that can make a tremendous difference in the businesses.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool stuff, man. I didn't even realize we were going to get to talk about that. So that's cool. Well, it's been awesome getting to talk to you, Alan, and I'm so glad we were able to talk about some of these COVID programs. And again, people, if you got that Main Street loan, go study the terms on that thing, because next
Right.
year you could be in for, and beyond, you could be in for some ugly surprises. If you are having trouble and don't know where to turn, it may be worth giving the people here at Turning Point a shout. Their website is turning-point.com. Is that right?
Yeah.
And Alan, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they need to?
Well, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can give you my email. It's pretty simple. Alan C, as in cat, Alan C at turning-point.com.
There we go. There we go. Well, it's great having you here today, Alan. We're talking from Turning Point Strategic Advisors, having you here talking about the repercussions of the COVID relief programs. Thanks so much, everyone that's listening, and I appreciate you being here today, Alan. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity, Damon. It was great fun.
You bet. We'll be back again on Thursday with another show. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by. Have a great day.